In the beginning, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving on the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of the heaven." And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female he created them. Some read Genesis as history. In the 17th century, an Irish archbishop named James Ussher calculated the date of creation by studying genealogies recorded in the Bible. God made the world in 4004 BC, he said. "6,000 years later, naturalists of 19th century England had some questions for God. Why did God make so many species? Why should there be thousands of kinds of birds? And why, for heaven's sakes, should there be over 1 million different kinds of bugs? And why did God bury the bones of unknown animals in ancient rocks? And why did high hills look like they were once at the bottom of the sea? It would take far more than 6,000 years to move a seashell to the top of a mountain. It took a born naturalist and trained observer, an Englishman named Charles Darwin, to hold the world up to the microscope of his mind and see what everyone else had seen, but in a way no one else ever had.
It is interesting to contemplate a tangled bank clothed with many plants of many kinds, with birds singing on the bushes, with various insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth, and to reflect that these elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other and dependent upon each other in so complex a manner, have all been produced by laws acting around us.
What Darwin gave us is an explanation, I go further, the explanation, for why we exist.
The publication of The Origin of Species by Darwin in 1859 ushered in the greatest intellectual revolution since the proclamation of Christianity 2,000 years earlier.
Darwin visualized the progress of evolution as being like a tree of life. From the solid trunk of a very limited number of primitive organisms, over time, sprouted the stout branches of fish and reptiles and plants and insects and mammals. They in turn branched out again and again, until finally there were roses and radishes, pigeons and peacocks, monkeys, apes and humans. Darwin's explanation was based on his theory of natural selection. In the random shuffle of heredity, each new individual is born slightly different from others. Occasionally, an individual will be born who is stronger, faster, or better able to cope with the changing world. That individual will thrive and pass on the advantage to its offspring. Generation upon generation, small changes accumulate until the new organism no longer breeds with what its ancestors had been. A new species has evolved.
Non-random survival over countless generations leads to a gradual evolutionary change from small beginnings on our planet like bacteria, over a sufficiently large number of these non-randomly selected generations, you end up with things like us, mammals, birds, highly complicated, beautifully designed creatures.
There's not a shred of evidence that will stand the test of time that denies the biblical account of creation. That when God created Adam and then took Eve out of the side of Adam, they were as complete as we are now, that there was no evolution, no change.
Darwin's theories moved man from his long-held position at the center of creation, causing a clash that carries over even to today. Nearly half of all Americans have said they prefer the biblical account of creation.
It's like, to me, saying that this watch, with all of its intricate parts, somebody somewhere just threw a lot of metal up in the air one day and it came down, a watch that tells me exactly what time it is. It's even more ridiculous than that, because man is by far a more marvelous creation than this wristwatch.
The argument goes that if there is a watch, there must have been a watchmaker. So surely the far more intricate world of living things must imply a designer. What Darwin was saying is that the struggle for survival alone, given immense spans of time, can produce the rich and varied world we see today. Darwin knew his book would get him into trouble with those who take the Bible literally. So, in hundreds of pages of examples of evolution, man gets only a single sentence on the last page.
In the future, I see open fields for far more important researchers. Much light will be thrown on the origin of man and his history.
I think people want to believe they're quite special, that, you know, somebody, God, put them there specially as a quite unique kind of creature and minds about them differently from what he minds about other creatures. And of course that's very much not part of Darwin's view. I mean, we're just another species out of many. Nothing special about us at all.
It seems to be true that real opposition to Darwin developed when people recognized the full implication that we are closely related to apes. This is hard for us to believe today because we're so obviously related to apes. I mean, they're so immensely similar to us. But it nevertheless appears to be historically true that that was what gave people the most trouble.
There's that wonderful saying which comes down to us from the Victorian period of a bishop's wife who, when she heard about the idea of evolution, is supposed to have said, let us pray that it's not true, but if it is, let us hope that it will not become widely known. And I think that this is a reflection of a real discomfort that many people have always had with the notion that we are part of a planetary process of evolutionary change.
43 years after his death, Darwin was in the headlines all across America. They called it the Scopes Monkey Trial.
Dateline, Dayton, Tennessee, July 11th, 1925. In a moment, the story.
Young John Scopes was charged with teaching evolution in his public school classroom. Perennial presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan rose from his sickbed to rally the prosecution. Defending Scopes was the equally famous Clarence Darrow.
On the day of the trial, a full house of avid spectators from all over the nation filed in to hear the debate. The issue was no longer the innocence or guilt of Scopes, but rather the final death struggle between two basic human philosophies, fundamentalism versus modernism.
In the end, Scopes was found guilty and fined $100. The verdict was overturned on a technicality, but the law stayed on the books in Tennessee until 1967.
The Scopes trial was just as farcical as some of the trials today in which teachers are ordered not to teach the creation model. A teacher should be allowed to teach any and all perspectives of truth. It's been our experience that when we do that openly and fairly, creation wins hands down.
That people would prefer miracles to a simple natural law puzzles some researchers and angers others.